So this is the closing circle or full group harvest after our two small group conversations. And my invitation to you here is for each of you, any of you, we don't all have to speak, to share something, a particular jewel, if you will, an insight that came to you, or a learning, or a question, or a challenge, or something that surprised you. To not speak at length, we can speak more than once, in fact, too, but let's just name these individually, these little nuggets as much as we can. There's also a Google form where you can share these in text form, and another form for sharing resources. I see that someone just put a link in there in the chat, so we can also do that after the conversation ends. But let me just invite you to find a talking object for yourself, if you will, and let's try to share briefly and hear at least once from everyone who wants to name at least one thing that was of value or meaning to you in this conversation. The piece back in the center.
I want to say that I like what Antonio said about SoL going into trying to do something where you have a tangible focus, because learning is about having something to learn about. If you are a child, you learn about everything. As an adult, you need a purpose. And I think that has been a missing point in SoL. And I also felt that one of the reasons why while I met enormous quality of people in SoL and have lots of good friends from that, I felt it became too much of a meeting place for consultants instead of really having an agenda to try to do something. And you said North America, Antonio, had died from almost being too business-like, too many consultants may be business-like, which I felt was a big problem, and lost inspiration or energy to work on that. And I love what you said, because at least in the European community of SoL, that was at the time when I was really active, and I know so many of them are still active, is in this way. And it is in those meetings where we can confer, sense, or use whatever we do to go beyond. But it needs to be focused. So I support what you're saying. And I also believe what you said about community. Because Bjarne knows, and we did in the 20s, 20 years ago, tried to experiment on learning communities, meaning municipalities. And how do we take it all the way up? But it was way too immature. People didn't even understand what we were talking about. The world has come so far that there is another level of maturity today that is so dramatically different from 30 years ago. Yes. So I love what you're doing. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Italy there?
Yeah, Italy, you're muted, so if you're speaking, we're not hearing you. And I muted you too, Antonio, because we were hearing the wind noise.
Yeah. We had this short discussion here, and our thinking is more like, because in Scandinavia now we have there's a new word, they call it flight shame or something like that. So people should be ashamed to fly, and then
yes.
So we think that's really a dead end in talk. It's the opposite of system thinking. So so what we discussed is like, how can we as a community be a space for people meet to work on system change, technology, all kinds of initiatives. So, for instance, we had to share a video from Einar about the farming problem with the spreading of drought, the desert, compared to how do you use the how to say it in English, grass eating cattle,
livestock.
Yeah, livestock. Thank you.
Ruminants. Yeah.
So I think
regenerative agriculture. intensive grazing, all that. Yes.
It's a more like how can we try to be a space for discussion and connect people together for working with this kind of system change that can really impact on the global warming issue.
Would you say, Björn,
and then we, of course, not the project.
Bjarne, may I ask, is what you're saying that you want SoL to kind of be a supporting community to those kind of action groups or communities that are trying to do something, to be kind of trying to get them to reflect on the systemic approach, so on the systemic approach to see how they are part of a system and the different types of learnings in system dynamics?
Yeah, if you see, that's actually what I mean, and because if you see that stop flying is a no-brainer. The problem is, what is the problem? Problem is more a systemic problem, and it's connected. It's very, very complex and very connected. And then you have to see which kind of systemic factors, and so to speak, also non-political. Because if you discuss if left or right in the political, it's also, in my opinion, a dead end discussion. It's more like to find all the people, all the environment that really work on deep learning on systemic change. It could be technology, environment, and of course farming is very important, and fish farming is very important. There's a lot of areas where you have very, very good initiatives globally. And then so our society could be, should support to give space to those initiatives. And we talk about the European Learning Plaza, for instance. They should be, these kind of initiatives should be on the Learning Plaza. How can we learn? How can we speed up the learning together? The interaction and learning together.
We can't solve this in Piemonte or in Spain or in. We can only, how can we contribute to the best possible effect? And we believe that would be with helping people to better understand the system they are working on and what is actually the real problem, which we maybe not know. We don't know, or we have hypotheses. So what can if the question was personally survive, stay in integrity when mainstream is insane. It's so if and then I think you asked, is that's what you think SoL should do? I think these are sort of slightly different. What we ended up discussing, I guess, was as a frame was this flying thing, where the people's need for transportation will always be there. People want to go places, and they'll go. That we used to do, and we do it. It's our nature to do it in the easiest possible way. So you can say if we say we raise the prices, we make it illegal. The challenge, the problem is then you might be creating separate human societies where some people are allowed to fly and some people are not. I don't think that's what we want. So there's no answer here from us, I guess, but it's more a reflection on there's still the need for systemic thinking and reflect. Yeah. And the role of technology development.
Okay, thank you, Eivind. I would also like to say then, when I prepared myself for this conversation today, I said I was going to be a child and not myself. So how to be a child and to keep the sanity in this world. Listening to Antonio and the idea of having the learning journeys to Italy and Spain for the SoL community, and to go slow, as he said. To really stay sane is to accelerate and learn from nature. So the learning journey is actually to be together for some time and to accelerate personal wisdom and to share it with nice and loving people. Because as Antonio said, there is a love and care society of SoL that has been together for over 20 years. So that's one thing, this slow thing. And then you have the accelerating of speed, which has to come with busyness. So how do we have an action cafe of support? And how do we, as SoL consultants, have a possibility to tap into local communities and to accelerate a defined profile of a community, like in Malta, for example, in textile, or in Italy for textile and recycling of plastic, or the same for Spain. How is the busyness of action in an action cafe instead of meta talking about learning? But that's two different things. So we have to have slow and fast. That's my learning. And fun. And a glass of wine.
I could say something, or does anyone else have a quick comment? Antonio, yes.
The reasons why, we believe that the collaboration, should be reinforced is because right now, if you see in all our societies, each individual behaves as a large system. The social media create a behavior in individuals that, when they go somewhere, they believe that they represent themselves, the whole system. Okay, and it's easy to see in our conversations where there is even a sort of word solution to these sort of conversations. So we are able to create a lot of terms, a lot of concepts, a lot of approaches, and so on and so forth. But when we see the end of the process, we're not even able to digest so big a production of words. Okay, so the collaboration is the way we try also to approach is by not going into, let's say, problem-solving questions rather than going upwards in our own, and just calling questions where we can work with, but not in a problem-solving perspective. Now, as I said before, the main challenge for SoL is still to, let's say, move into action, which is, I guess, I hope, one of the main decisions we are making at this global SoL 4.0 gathering.
Thank you. So we're at the top of the hour. I know people have to go. I so much appreciate that you're helping to launch this deep dive, and I hope it was in service to your work in SoL. It's kind of an interesting thing where this conversation can plug into different contexts. I know Inger-Mette is interested in having another round of this that's looking just particularly at fashion, for example, and there may be others. So there's an ongoing invitation to convene more of these small group conversations around this set of questions. I will share by email through Inger-Mette the links to how to do that, as well as a link for a forum if you want to add more to the harvest from this conversation today, or share resources. We want an annotated list of resources. So not just a link, but a brief statement from you. Why is this valuable to you? Why is it worth it for someone else to look at it? So I would love to have that be generated as well from this conversation if you wish. And then the last part also was this idea of a paradigm bridging conversation, of finding somebody who you think really does think differently than you in some fundamental respect around this tension of new paradigm consciousness versus mainstream consciousness, and to talk about that with them, not to change them necessarily, but just to find some relationship, to be kind, to discover, I think that for me, that was the heart of this conversation, was this idea that the way we stay sane is by focusing on the process and the relationships, being with people that we love, being kind, having fun, taking inspiration from the natural world, things that nourish us. And the changes, the outcomes, the impact we have is important, but the only way we can have impact that's in integrity and not contributing to the insanity is if we come from that first principle of relationship and kindness and love. Someone said love and knowledge together. It's just for part of the SoL manifesto, if you will. So I found that very inspiring. Thank you all.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, Inger-Mette, for organizing.
Thanks to all.
Thank
Thanks
you.
to the
Thank you.
Piemonte people.
Thank you, Bjarne.
Bjarne, thank you.
Thank you, Bjarne.